to our country. We've put al-Qaeda on the path to defeat.
We ended the war in Iraq, refocused our attention on those who actually killed us on 9/11. And as a consequence, al-Qaeda's core leadership has been decimated.
If we are joined by the international community, we can continue to shrink ISIL's sphere of influence, its effectiveness, its financing, its military capabilities, to the point where it is a manageable problem.
All right, pretty scary from the man who's responsible for keeping Americans safe. And on that note, let's start this Hannity conversation on radical Islam and America. Tonight, my distinguished panel for the entire hour includes the co-host of The Five, Bob Beckel, the president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is with us. And also with us is Indianapolis area Imam, that's Mohammed Sadiq, and Fox News military analyst Colonel David Hunt. I got to start with this. Was Fort Hood an act of terrorism? Was Boston an act of terrorism? Was Oklahoma the beheading an act of terrorism?
Clearly.
All examples of terrorism.
And he called it something different was politics. I mean, we called it workplace violence in Fort Hood. It was ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. 13 dead, 30 injured. Allahu Akbar, the guy says, is Major Assad.
Clearly an act of terrorism, as obviously the Boston Marathon.
Imam?
I can't say what it is. I can say what it isn't. It has nothing to do with Islam. But I can say it was a terroristic act. I can also say it was a horrible act, and it's something we all appall and can't stand.
How can you say it's nothing? Are radical Islamists, those that believe in jihad against the infidels, those that want holy war, those that view apostates as having to be killed and death should be to apostates, are they not radical Islamists?
No, you can't. I keep trying to tell you, Sean, you cannot put Islam and radicalism together.
Why not? Is there no such thing as radical Islam?
No. Islam was revealed by God. You cannot take God's word and then take something from the world and put it with God's word.
But if people use Islam and the Quran to justify the killing of innocent men, women, and children, and they are promised 72 virgins in heaven, is that not radical Islam?
No, they use their understanding of Islam to do what they want.
Now we're parsing words. Zuhdi Jasser.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, it's so important to take the opposite approach of what my friend Imam Sadiq is doing here, because you can't treat the problem unless you diagnose it. And the diagnosis is political Islam, the ideology that permeated the Brotherhood that won an election in Egypt, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamist Wahhabis of Saudi Arabia. All over the Muslim world, you've got this ideology that's thriving, that some say, yes, the violent component might be 5 to 10%, but the political ideology has won elections. And this is what drives, this is why it's so important to call Fort Hood terrorism. Terrorism is about...
And Oklahoma, terrorism.
Exactly, because it's violence that seeks a political ends. Whether it's a beheading, whether it's Fort Hood, whether it's the Boston bombing, these are individuals that have a virus that didn't come out of thin air. It's political Islamism. The Brotherhood's virus gets into their mind, and they become anti-Western, anti-liberty, anti-American, and they commit a random act of violence.
And this is your religion.
It's not my Islam, but I'm adult enough.
Muslim.
Exactly.
That's what I mean.
I'm adult enough to say that it is a version of Islam, that if this country doesn't start targeting as far as the ideology, we're going to continue to get hit.
Not just this country, it is also the entire world that needs to confront radical Islam. Bob Beckel, we don't agree on a whole lot. You have said, I want to open up my show, The Five, and provide a forum for moderate Muslims to confront and condemn radical Islam.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not overstating the case. I was the first one on this network to come out strongly on this issue. And my point was that if you look at Boston and if you look at 9/11, those two particularly, there was not a single head of a Muslim state, not a single imam, not a single cleric, not a single person of any standing in the community in the Middle East who ever said they thought this was wrong, that it was not the following, that the Prophet would not have approved of it. And I said one thing very bluntly, which got me in a lot of trouble, but I'm going to repeat it. If you don't speak out, you either agree with these people or you're cowards.
Well, all right. For those that are watching the hijacking of their religion, that don't have the more radical interpretation of the Quran, Because you can interpret things any way you want, I guess. Those that take jihad seriously, infidels seriously, holy war seriously, if you take neither Christians nor Jews, and we'll get into this in more detail, are they afraid, or it seems there can only be one of two things, Dr. Jasser. Either they're afraid that they will be targeted and labeled an apostate, and we know if you're labeled an apostate, the penalty of which is death, or are they silently supportive, perhaps, of that interpretation of Islam?
Well, I think it's all of the above. I think there are components of those of us that are trying to reform that see what happens to people like me that speak up and get targeted and
How many fatwas have been put out on you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that Islamists target me as being not a Muslim or some type of tool or any other way to avoid the message, which is that we need reform, and I do it from a position of love within my faith. But with all due respect to my friend Bob, the left has, and why aren't you waking up your friends on the left? They have prevented us from having the conversation. We need a this is not a partisan issue. The feminists, the gay rights movements, and all others that the left values.
Under Sharia, gays are killed.
Exactly.
Women don't have rights to drive. They have to be covered.
Before you make a broad statement like that, it was, I put my liberal credentials up against anybody, and it was a liberal who spoke out on this network first, not a single conservative.
I hate to tell you, I was right there.
You were there. You were.
Do it on the left.
What we have to do here is recognize this is not a liberal conservative issue. It requires us to say in unison that we are a country that is under attack by individuals, by organizations, by others. That
by
need
an
to come
ideology.
together. But can I just take the workplace violence for a second? The one thing I will say to defend the Justice Department, if you declare it an act of terror, it doesn't fall under the Patriot Act, or it does fall under the Patriot Act, and that means it'd be much more difficult to have this guy convicted. If it's workplace violence, it's easier to have him convicted.
But let me just stop you. But the president,
I think that's right.
The official line of the administration is that Fort Hood is workplace violence, and that Oklahoma, they refuse to say an act of terrorism. So you're at odds with a president that you're pretty supportive of.
I want to hear what
but stick with that. You're at odds with a president you generally support a lot.
I believe that it was an act of terror, but I believe it's easier to prosecute if you call it workplace violence.
But
and it's easier to see.
The first report on Fort Hood didn't even use the word Islam, jihad, Salafi. His name wasn't even in it. And then the William Webster report 2.5 years later did address some of the ideologies, but it is just, I think, absurd and insanity that we're not addressing the ideology of jihadism. We're not doing it.
It's not more difficult, Bob. And the problem is that the Justice Department has drug its feet, as the Department of the Army has, on prosecuting this guy. I don't care if you call it stealing cats and dogs. The guy should be in jail. Should have been executed a long time ago for what he did. So the definition, my problem was that it was so obvious not to call it an act of terror and to go to workplace violence. The problem with both definitions is that the government has not prosecuted this guy.
Yeah, but
we just haven't.
Why can't we just start? I think we're at and they live happily ever after. Whatever happened to once upon a time? Meaning, where does the story start? We all agree. We're Americans. I'm an American. Let's understand that we're all in agreement, I believe, that we don't want any harm to come to any innocent person, and especially American citizens.
But I've had you on this program, and I ask you, is Hamas's charter says to obliterate Israel. I ask you if they're a terror organization, and you say no.
I don't, Sean.
No. That's a big deal. If you can't admit the obvious, if their charter says to kill Jews and obliterate Israel, that's a terror organization.
Okay, but Sean, here's the thing that I
Why
don't.
Why won't you say it?
Okay, but can I explain? Now we have a little time here. First of all, not only is Hamas's charter needs to be revised, not only does it have to be revised, take it Likud. But I don't want to.
You want to revise their charter, or they're the fascists that run that organization? It's not the charter that's the problem; it's the fascists.
Let your brother talk for a little bit. We're going to leave here.
You're killing me.
I know. We're going to leave here as brothers, and we're going to have prayer together.
But you're saying they're not a terror organization.
I'm saying if we start there. And don't start with where all this stuff started. We don't look at Likud. We don't look at what they say. I don't want to get into condemning Likud. I don't want to get into Hamas. I want to come together first on the idea, let's save our country and let's save innocent people. And we as Americans...
The only way you're going to start is for people, good people, to challenge a charter that calls for the destruction of a state and an innocent people.
But maybe in the final analysis, Sean, if we start at the beginning...
But if you don't do it, you're an imam.
Your apologetics... are actually.
I'm not apologetic, but there are steps that we must take to get to that.
Right.
That way, we'll cut the cake fairly, and we won't be just singling
We
it
have a
out.
lot more to come.
us.
Guys,
Okay.
stay right there. Coming up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
The United States is not and never will be at war with Islam. Islam teaches peace.
All right, for years, President Obama has been saying that Islam is a religion of peace, but some say recent world events may prove otherwise. Our panel